what I thought what a man was supposed to be, because what the outside world had shown me was that a man was to be a certain way, and that included that it was okay to lie, it was okay to um, hide things. And so for me at that time, it felt like it was normal. In fact, I was doing that in all my relationships previous to the one that I am in right now.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear your story because this is a first for me to have a couple that are going to take turns in being interviewed. And you are both relationship coaches. So I'm sure you both bring different parts of value to the table. So specifically, you're working with healing dysfunctional family dynamics. Is that right?
That's right. That is definitely one part of the relationship work that we work with. My wife specializes more in dealing with women and healing of the womb. And I also work with men, specifically helping them with self-sabotage, reoccurring patterns that don't serve them, addiction, along those lines of work.
Interesting. So we're going to dive into what your part is today because I'm sure there's a lot to cover. But
Yeah.
just before we get started, what is your personal journey? What got you into this?
That's a great question. For myself, I grew up with a very loving, connected family. I actually grew up with my parents and my grandparents all in the same house. I was very fortunate to have that experience. And had a really close bond with my grandfather. And I feel that there was three major events in my life that really contributed to my spiritual awakening. The first one was and at that time, I actually didn't know that this was one of the major events, but it was when my grandfather had cancer and he passed away when I was the age of 13, 14. And of course, at that point, diving deeper into what I knew as a 13-year-old was I'm a man, I'm a young boy. I need to be strong. I can't show emotions. I need to hold it all together. I need to push through. And from there, it's interesting when I look back at it, I see all the different ways that I would cope to sort of deal with the grief. And I didn't realize it till many, many years later, probably actually within the last few years, 3 to 5 years, that I hadn't fully grieved with his passing and his transition. And for me, that's been a part of my journey that's led me to where I am now, where I was able to go back and connect with my grandpa and release everything that I was holding in. And so that's the first major event for me that really started my awakening, even though I wasn't consciously aware of it at that time, at that age.
Mm. Yeah. So, and from there, what happened after that?
Well, from there, is referring to the next event in my life that occurred. The
Hmm.
second major event would have to be with when I was engaged with my wife, my now wife, then fiance. What had come to the surface was I was caught in a web of lies. Lots of lies had come to the surface that had poured in a lot of guilt and shame into my life. And it really put me in a position that I just didn't know what to do. And I would say that's where my spiritual journey actually started is when that had happened, because then I was faced with, I started to learn how to go within. I started to pray regularly. I started to meditate. And from those experiences, I've been starting to unravel, and the journey has taken off. And that's been since 2016, 2017. So about 7 to 8 years now. And from there, I've realized that who I thought I was, I'm not. And I really started peeling off the layers of, what my upbringing brought me to who I am, and started to see connecting back with my true authentic self. So that way, I could fulfill what my purpose is. And that's what I feel like I'm doing now. Of course, it's an ongoing evolution of growth,
Yep.
but
So just On about the lies, like that doesn't happen out of nowhere. So obviously there's something in your life that maybe you felt like you had shortcomings. Um,
As far as the lies you'd mentioned,
mhm.
yeah. So it's interesting that you say that, and that takes me back to the men's work that I do. It's really the upbringing that I had, the what I thought what a man was supposed to be, because my what the outside world had shown me was that a man was to be a certain way, and that included that it was okay to lie, it was okay to um, hide things, and so for me at that time, it felt like it was normal. In fact, I was doing that in all my relationships previous to the one that I am in right now,
Yeah.
and that's when it all uncovered.
So your wife obviously brought out the authentic you. The
Definitely. And that's why
no,
I mentioned to you earlier that really our relationship is medicine for both of us because we feel that we've both been able to grow and evolve and bring out our authentic selves to a higher level.
yeah. So that must be quite tough to admit to these things, to be able to say, yes, I did all this. Because most people, I think that would be the hardest part is, in AA, it's the first step.
Exactly, admitting it, right? And of course, at that time, it wasn't easy. But now, when I reflect back at it, it's probably one of the greatest gifts of my life. And that's why I am so open and passionate about sharing it, is
Mhm.
because it made me realize how many different ways I was coping with wanting to numb myself from really feeling what I needed to feel, going back to my grandfather's passing, which was grieving with it. And right after he passed, I could see how I was you know, coping with video games and partying, drugs, alcohol, women, all of these things were in my life, and it was a way for me to escape, really. And not knowing any better, of course, at that age, I just continued to do that, and I feel like this second um, this second milestone of my life was really the opportunity for me to make that shift and really
Yeah.
start to see what life really is all about and connect with myself on a deeper level.
Yeah. So you work with men now. I know that there's normally a culmination event where people say, okay, it's time I need to look within. Something has to change. So before we go about your clients, what happened with you where you said, okay, I'm doing these things? Was there an ultimatum? Was there like a dark night of the soul? What happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the second scenario that I shared with my wife, it was definitely a realization because of that. I've never carried that guilt and shame in my life before, where I thought I don't no longer even want to be here. Like that's how deep it got. And when it took me to that place, I realized that there has to be more to life than this. And truly, I knew within I have a good heart and and I care for others very deeply. And I want them to feel love. I want them to be happy. And so that's when I started to unravel and start searching and of course, that's why I bring back to prayer and meditation. I feel that the alignment's starting to happen with the right people to come into my life and show me what was possible. And I
Yeah.
started to uncover and see like, hey, this piece, that isn't me. And this right here, that was just me, you know, seeing somebody else and trying to role model them and who they were being. That's truly not who I am within. And of course, going deeper into that is when the shadows start to come out. And with my shadows, I didn't even know what a shadow was. So when they started to come into play, that was really, really confronting with me. But it's been a journey over several years to start to uncover and work with those and to, really go back to myself.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's get to your clients now. So you say you work with addiction and um, probably low self-esteem as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who are your, is it mostly couples that come or is it mostly men that come on their own? What is
So
the,
our wife and my wife and I, what we work with is we actually have, we call it, we're co-founders of Revive Community. And in Revive Community, what we do is we do breathwork integration. And the reason why we focus so much on breathwork is we know how powerful of a tool it is to somatically release what's trapped within the body, because we all experience emotions, and we know that with emotions, we're supposed to experience them, but we're also supposed to let them go as they pass through us. And what happens is they tend to get trapped in the body if they're not processed properly. And so that's why breath work is such an important component to our community, is because then we're able to somatically go within and release those, hidden emotions or trapped emotions within us. And the other part of it is diving into relationship mastery so that we can connect on a deeper level, one with ourselves and then with everybody around us that we want to be connected to. So that's what we do with our work in the Revive community. And then for myself, I lead men's circles. So that's going back to the men's circles, is really people that are just, feeling really stuck, or they're like self-sabotaging themselves and they don't understand why, or they have reoccurring patterns like addiction, and they need to break free of that. So those are the different types of work that we work with.
Yeah, I know a lot with addiction. It's not, the addiction isn't the problem. People tend to see that is the problem. It's actually something they're escaping from,
That's
which
right.
is, it's so then everyone focuses on that thing, but it's not the thing. The thing is the escape mechanism. So you work with dysfunctional family dynamics, and that, do you do that in the somatic breath work? Do you help them to go back to the childhood trauma and connect? How do you do
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
yeah, just explain the process of it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that we're working with, whether it's, relationships, family, if it's a men's container, it's always going back to find out where the root of the problem exists, right? And a lot of that usually comes from, either their childhood or their early ages of life where they're experiencing that. And sometimes what happens is they consciously don't even have the memory, or have blocked it or pushed it so far down that it isn't even there for them to explore further. So that's why either, we will dive into like a inner child meditation to bring them back to that space, or a breath work, because a lot of times, visualizations or insights will appear from that. So specifically, depending on what they're experiencing, we'll go into that with a breath work, a meditation, to call that out. Especially prompts are very important to, have people unravel, because we believe that, the answer is truly within, if you're willing to explore and go deep enough. So that's really the starting point for them, is to explore what that is. Because like you had mentioned, it's the problem isn't usually the problem. Like the addiction or what you're doing, it's a coping mechanism for something that is even deeper within.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a common thread with these men?
Yes.
Something like that's happening in the times we're living in? Well, you tell me.
Yeah. I think that right now, in the times that we live in, men carry a real heavy pressure on their shoulders. And I feel, whether they're in a relationship or their parents, they feel a lot of pressure in today's world. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of people are either just not sure what to do, or they have that lone wolf mentality. So they don't believe that they're supposed to get help, or they can join communities that are available. And that's why it's so important, these men's circles and men's groups, because it gives the opportunity. And what all men discover in these spaces is that we're actually all very similar, and we're all very connected, and we're usually all experiencing the same things. So when one man shares, we are able to connect to it with our own life stories that are happening, and we can also like grow, evolve, and move forward
Yeah.
from what we're learning. So these spaces are very, very powerful. And I feel that because of what the masculine energy is portrayed to be, where it's just supposed to be strong, to hide your emotions, you don't need any help, you can do it all on your own. These type of things really make it difficult for men to step forward and seek the help that they need, the guidance that they need, so that they can have these breakthroughs.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's a missing element of male role models that are functional. It's almost
Yeah.
like you're trying to aspire to this model that doesn't really exist, or it's seen in the movies, or they don't have a father present, because there's a lot of single women out there. And who do you model? The gangster friends, the Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
It
And that
actually
and that's
it
what
reminds
happens.
me of a TikTok that I watched. This woman said, she said to her boyfriend, "How many times a day do you think of the Roman Empire? So how many times a day do you think of the Roman Empire?" And he couldn't believe it. He said, "What have you been reading? Who told you?" And it's like all men think of the Roman Empire. I mean, women don't. So when they hear that, they think, why? But like you said, there's a group think. Men do all have the same kind of traits. And when you realize that, then it's okay. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to be human. How else do you learn? How else do you grow? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And even
Okay.
more
So what
deeper,
are, yeah, Karen?
I was going to just share with you even more deeper to that is going back to emotions and men, because of course, the the view on masculinity is to not show your emotions, and you have to hold it all within. But what happens with those trapped emotions is that it actually just builds deeper and deeper within, so that when we're triggered, it's more explosive. And so that can, really, really hurt. Going back to your relationship, it can
Yeah.
really hurt any relationship in your life, because by you not expressing those emotions or not doing, like, for example, breath work to somatically release them, it's just a matter of time before that trigger shows up. And triggers, a lot of them stem back to when we're younger, when we're kids, and they're imprinted in the body. And sometimes, I was listening to a man speak, and he's 80 years old, and he was sharing that, even sometimes his wife comes in the room unexpectedly, he jumps because there's something that happened when he was a child that still is within him. And he's done so much work, but that still is imprinted within his body. So with these type of things, we if we don't do any of the work, what happens is the buildup just continues until that trigger shows up for us, and then it can be an explosive reaction. And of course not. It can, hurt definitely the relationships that are around you if that continues to happen over and over and over again, and you have no idea how to emotionally regulate.
Yeah. And I know it's tough for men out there in the dating world as well, because a lot of women don't want to date anymore. And the men are saying, well, so how do they navigate around that? Because I know there's this 4B movement, and women are saying they've had enough. They'd rather choose the bear. What do you
Mhm.
say to those men? What are they
Well,
missing?
it's an interesting dynamic, because in today's world, we see that a lot of women are very driven, they're very out there, hardworking, and they step further and further into their masculinity. And we know that everybody, it doesn't matter male or women or what gender you are, we all have both energies within us. So it's about balancing those energies, and allowing them for you to be present in them when the timing is right. Not saying that one is wrong and one is right, depending on what gender you are. So for men, the way I look at it is a woman, even if they're driven, if they're one of those, boss, CEO type of, they wear those roles. At the end of the day, we know that they want to be in their feminine. They want to be free flowing. They want to be held. They want to be cared for. And so the men really need to step up into that. So just going back to, how things used to be, simple gestures like opening the door, and, like, just stepping more into the masculine role, making the decision for them, rather than, oh, what would you like to do? That was something that at the beginning of my relationship used to happen all the time, and it would just lead us nowhere. It's like my wife would ask, oh, where do you want to eat for dinner? And I'd be like, I don't know, what do you want to eat for dinner? And at the end of the day, she just wants to go eat dinner, and she wants me to make that choice. But because, especially with the dynamic that we had in our relationship, because of what happened, I had fallen deeper into my feminine, and she had gone deeper into her masculine. So that dynamic was depolarizing. And so, just being able to step more into your masculinity so that feminine could lay back and feel and be in that space more, I think it will create more polarity in any relationship.
Yeah, I think it's basically a point of saying, okay, let's start again. Let's rethink and rewrite the script. Yeah. So, what
Absolutely.
are some common dysfunctional family dynamics that people might overlook?
Oh, with family dynamics in relationship, I think it goes back to communication and connection are the big ones. Is that really the men, women, whatever gender they are, is are they able to communicate to each other? So is their partner able to feel seen, heard, and more importantly, do they feel safe? Right? Of course, there is things like trust and all those other dynamics to the relationship, but sometimes, especially for when people are coming into their masculinity, masculine energy, I should say, they want to solve a problem. They want to make things right. But sometimes when the feminine energy, they're not looking for you to do that. They just want you to hear them and acknowledge them and be present for them. And so I think going back to communication is such a big key component in a lot of relationships, and not even just in your partner relationship, but also with your kids. Like for me, I have a 2-year-old son right now, and it was the biggest learning. That was actually my third event in my life that absolutely changed my life, is becoming a father. Because what he has taught me, and he's taught me so much, is he's taught me how to be one, more present, and also how to regulate my nervous system so that I can be connected with him. When he's having a breakdown or a meltdown, allow him to have that space so that he can fully express himself. Where when I was a child, I was told to stop. That's not right. You don't need to cry. And what happens is I closed and I wasn't able to fully express myself. Right. And I think that's a lot of people growing up back then. And I feel like the times are sort of changing for the parents that are more open to allowing their kids to freely, truly express themselves. But you should see, after he expresses himself for a few seconds, and I get down to his level, not talking above him, and I can communicate with him and just express to him, hey, I understand. You don't feel like eating right now and you want to play toys. I would want to play toys, and that's why you're screaming. But guess what? If we eat something, right after we'll go back to playing the toys, I promise you. And he understands at 2 years old. He really does understand. And he will
Yeah.
stop crying and he will start, we will go do the next thing, whatever it is. But it's just being okay with the meltdown. And at the beginning, when that used to happen, I used to get very triggered because I wasn't aware of this type of parenting. I wasn't brought up in this type of parenting. So for me, I think, going back to your original question, which has led me into parenting and the family dynamics and relationship, I think communication is so key.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem as well is that when people get into that crisis mode, they go into fight or flight, and then you're not able to think clearly of what to say, and then you respond in the way that you would have as a child, and you
Right.
become sort of an explosive, and that's where it all goes south. So the work has to happen when you're not in a stressful situation, not when you're in the thick of it, not when you're in the middle of an argument.
That's right.
You know,
That's
then
right.
it's too late. But I can see how that would manifest if you tell your son, stop crying, grow up, eat your
Mhm.
food, how that would how you would be later on, because you'd know, I'm not allowed to argue, I'm not allowed to say anything, I'm going to be told to keep quiet, and you carry that without even realizing that you're carrying it. So how do these guys uncover that? Like, how do they get to that point? How do they understand where it comes from?
Yeah. So really, the first step is to just go back and to understand and create awareness of where that even started. Who was it with? Because everybody has a different dynamic, whether it's your mom or your dad. And understanding that our parents did the best that they absolutely could with what they knew, and to, release and let go and forgive them for
Mm,
everything that had happened in the past. Because holding on to anything is actually just restricting yourself from truly being free. So when you're able to do that, then you're able to actually work on yourself and forgive yourself. And then going more into what you spoke about is, what is the work that I need to do to deepen my practice so that these type of things don't happen? And for me, regular things are prayer, meditation, breath work, journaling. These are regular practices that I do on a daily basis, moving my body, getting out into nature, all of these things help me regulate my nervous system.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also share it's very interesting because I grew up with a younger brother. And when I look at the way we were brought up, I found that I was disciplined much more heavily than he was growing up. And I always thought growing up that it was great the way I was raised because I was so disciplined, I was so respectful. Or if you knew who my younger brother was, he is full of life, fully expressive, and he's out there and he just is truly himself. But I'm like, he has no boundaries. He just does what he wants. And it wasn't until, a couple of years ago where I'm like, oh my God, if I reflect back on my childhood, all those times that I was being disciplined, like on a higher level than what I feel my younger brother did, it was actually shining and it was like dimming my light as a kid. And I didn't even see that till now. And I think that made it was a profound experience for me to really understand and learn that. And that like that's why my brother is who he is today, because he actually wasn't disciplined the same way I was, and he's able to be fully expressed in who he really is, more of. And so that was an important key for me to learn in the last couple of years. So that way I didn't do the same thing to my son and pass that down.
Yeah. Well, there's always the other side of the coin that we don't see. If you think somebody else is lucky, it's because you're not seeing something, you're missing it. Or if you think you're having a bad time, you're missing what was the good in that,
Right,
you know.
right. Everything in
So
life is a lesson or a blessing.
yeah, yeah, there's both at the same time. Yeah, always.
Absolutely.
I was gonna ask you something, now my brain just went. Um yeah. Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask you. So what is common with addiction? Because I know different illnesses or things manifest in different ways because of certain things. Like if there's a common factor among that. So have you seen that there's a commonality with people that have addiction?
Yeah, I mean, addiction, if you look back at it, it's what it is, it's a way to cope. It's a way to numb themselves so they can't feel what's meant to be felt. And I knew this because if I look back on my growth and evolution, I've had many different addictions and eating disorders. I was bulimic for many, many years. I've used different substances, pornography, work. Work was a big one for me. I was the type of person that I would jam pack my schedule, you know, not leaving a single minute just because that was a way for me to be addicted to my work so that I wouldn't be able to really feel what really needed to be felt. So, addiction can come in different forms. And I think that's where people are not aware of that. It doesn't always have to be the dark shadow aspect. It can also be things that are in the light that your addiction is you're using to cope with,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So I feel that with addiction, it's really, just numbing and not allowing yourself to really feel what's meant to be felt so that you can express and go through what needs to be felt to move through it and get to the other side.
Is that linked, like you mentioned guilt and shame earlier, is that the guilt and shame? Because there's lots of emotions, but those to me are like the heaviest, the lowest emotions that you could have. Is it
Yeah,
that
and
specifically?
those are the very common ones that I feel with men is guilt and shame. And they're both very different too, right? Um, because with men, it's usually something that they're carrying from their past that creates that emotion within them. And so with guilt, they feel like they've done something wrong, right? And they feel like what that is something that they can't get past in a way. So they almost like create this energy block within them that they can't move forward from. And shame could be something that has happened to them, or even they can be shameful of themselves. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter what stage of my life I am. I feel like there's shame in my body parts all the time. There's always a part of me that I'm shameful about, right? And I carry that with me. So, guilt and shame, I would say, are probably some of the lowest and probably most common that men carry with them all the time. And what's even more destructive is how we think on a regular basis, because I think it's something like 90% of the thoughts that we had yesterday, we carry into the next day. And so, can you imagine if we're not doing any work or anything like, any of the practices to help us move forward and break free, we're just repeating the same thoughts over and over and
Yep.
over again. So it's going to make it even feel heavier and more destructive to ourselves. And that's where people go into lean further into their addiction, whatever it is. And like I said, there's dark and there's light. Food is another one that for me was a very big one. As I explained, I was bulimic for many, many years. And it actually tied back, what I learned, it tied back to my grandfather. And it was my way of grief. I was able to cope with his death by eating. And it's interesting because before he passed, because he had cancer, I used to see him throw up all of the time. And a part of that was actually ingrained within me. And I think the bulimia stemmed from that, is because I witnessed him going through that transition in his life.
Yeah, that makes sense because you think, well, that's how I'm going to empathize with him. I can't grieve him. So this is my way of sharing my love,
Exactly.
as bad as it is. And you wouldn't be able to stop yourself from doing it.
No.
So what is toxic masculinity? That's a word I hear a lot, but what is that?
Yeah, so toxic masculinity is basically the opposite of being in your true divine masculinity. So toxic masculinity is the portrayal that we see out there of what masculinity is when it isn't. So, whether you call it toxic masculinity or wounded masculinity, it's, being that strong, macho man, the guy, the man who is with multiple women, the person who has all of these lives their life based on the materialistic items of the world. And so like, they don't respect, they have no respect, that they're driven, they're powerful. And not saying that it's all toxic, but these are some of the things that people see and they think that's masculinity when it really isn't, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Well, it's more one-sided. It's like there's no balance of
Yeah.
it's
And
portraying an image. It's not being authentic. Yeah.
exactly. It's portraying an image that was created by the external world of what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how have you changed? How are you different before to how you are now, like internally? How do you feel
Sure.
internally?
Yeah, that's a very, very deep question. And I was actually thinking about that today before we jumped on our call. It's just who I was, if I pinpoint, when I went through that, I would say almost like a dark night of the soul awakening in my relationship. I was a completely different person. If you looked at me, I was heavier set. I was drinking. I haven't drank alcohol for almost 2 years now. I was drinking all the time. I was coping. I was bulimic. I was eating. I was everything that I truly am not today. And what I am today is like, I'm just really driven on serving and helping people. And not only that, but just really focusing on the family dynamic for myself. Because my wife and I, we've been through so much. And I just see how much we both evolved together. And so, how can we continue to grow from there, but not only together? Now we have a little one. And so, what can we do to be with our future family and grow? And we know that life's journey for everyone will have whatever is meant to be. But what's the best role models we can be for our future children and our future generations? And even right now, like I lived in Vancouver, Canada all my life. And we actually just moved to Dubai about a month and a half ago. And, that was a decision that was a very difficult decision because I grew up in a big family and I've always been surrounded by my family, never had left home for, well into my 30s. And to make that decision was really a decision I had to make. I realized if I stayed in Vancouver, that would be a decision that I was making for myself right now and my past generations, where if this move, it was actually a decision that was made for, again, myself right now, my family, and future generations to go.
Yeah, well, that's good. So how would you differentiate Vancouver to Dubai? That's a big jump. Like, are the men different? Are the I know they are different, but what is your experience? Because you are the man, you're not the woman in that situation.
Yeah. As far as the place for us, it was a calling that was really deep within. I knew in my heart that it was the right move for us, just for us to focus on what our mission is. And with, I mean, besides the weather, the weather is amazing here compared back home
Yeah.
in Vancouver, where it's, usually raining 8 months of the year. But it was a vision that my wife and I always had. Even in our wedding vows, our wedding vows, we spoke into a 10-year vision of us being in a place, living near the beach with our family on the water. Like, always knew that we wanted to be global citizens. We didn't want to just stay in one space. So, it's just stepping into that direction, into the vision that we've always had. And this is the first step. Right now, we'll be celebrating, actually next week, we'll be celebrating our 8-year anniversary. I think it's 7-year anniversary, actually. So, yeah.
So next week there'll be congratulations in order.
That's right. That's right.
So are you hosting retreats there, or what are you doing in Dubai?
Yeah, so in Dubai, we're like a lot of our work is online. So we have the Revive community that I spoke about earlier, which is an online community. So members are from all over the world, and we are planning to start to host back home in Vancouver. We are also doing live events where we're doing breath work and sound baths. So we will be bringing that to Dubai in the new year. So we're looking forward to establishing that, and then retreats is something that we're going to be working on in the coming future as well. Whether they'll be here in Dubai or other parts of the world, we haven't determined where we're going to start, but that's something that we'll be looking into as well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Sound baths are awesome, by the way. I just I just love
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
It's a special treat.
It really, really is. There's so many benefits to a sound bath that can really help on levels that are not even conscious, like that are in the body. And it's just going back, that's like another practice that somebody can implement if they have access to sound baths. It's just a way for them to, realign their chakras, alleviate stress, allow the body to give it that rest that usually people don't give it. And so because of the vibrations, the sounds, the hertz, all of that coming together can really, really be profound for the body, mind, and soul.
Yeah. Yeah. So where can people get hold of you?
So the best place is Instagram. My Instagram is _ Aaron Sosa, AARON SOSA. And you can also find us at Revive _ Your Life. And that's our community page where we also share our upcoming events. And like I mentioned, my wife also holds women's circles focusing on the womb, which is called Rebirth. And I also host men's circles called Reborn.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing her talk on that as well,
Yeah.
because rebirthing is a big thing. And I actually heard that it's dangerous the way some people do it. So I'd
Mm.
be interested to see how she does it. But we're talking about you right now. So okay. Um, what practice do you recommend for individuals that want to heal their wounds? If they are not able to meet you or whatever, what can they do at home?
Just a simple breath work, I think, is very powerful. And, it's so accessible these days. If you go on YouTube and just search up breath work, you're going to find some are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 50 minutes long. Of course, there's a lot deeper that you can go when we do some of our events. We're going into deeper 30-minute, 40-minute journeys, which are quite profound. But just to start there, and I even think it's because there's so many people that come to me and they say, you know what, I can't meditate, I can't do it, I can't sit there and be still, and my mind is going. And what I always tell them is, well, don't start with meditation, start with breath work. Because when you're using the breath, what you're doing is you're getting out of your mind and going into the body. And then when you're in that space, it's easier for you to drop into a meditation after you do the breath work. So I would say something simple that wouldn't require myself or another practitioner would be to just go on YouTube, or if you, there's a lot of apps these days that you can get, and just a simple breathwork practice to start off and begin is the simplest tool, and I think it can do wonders.
Yeah, I like that because a lot of people think meditating is getting your mind out there, but it's actually going in. It's
That's right.
dropping down. It's not reaching out.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah, the,
that's the that's exactly it. Because I mean, so many people are like, they're all here when they're trying to meditate, and that's why they can't do it. It's like you got to be able to drop in, and so that's why I feel like sometimes the breath work can help you do that faster, and give you that access, so you're not stuck up here.
yeah. Do you have any like clients that have had some major breakthroughs that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many I can share regarding our circles. Like, there's a lot of men that it's interesting because I feel like, including myself, we all go through these phases where, things start to go really, really well, and then we get stuck, whether it's in our relationship, our finances, our purpose, our career. And so the breakthroughs that regularly happen is when you're able to go through, when you're able to get stuck. Because usually what I like to let my clients know is when you're feeling that space where you're stuck, or you're in a pattern where you just can't get out of it, there's an opportunity within that. There's an opportunity for growth and learning. Like, it's a divine time for you to really look into what that is and to push forward, right? I always say that God, the universe, will never give you more than you can handle. So that what you take on is specifically aligned and designed for you to have this breakthrough. So if you see the gift in it, like, it's just happening for you, not to you.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're coaching the men because I believe that women are not trying to be competitive. Women should need to be led, but women should lead women and men should lead men. It just, that's the way everybody understands themselves, they understand each other better, and
Yeah,
come to reach an agreement.
absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just one last question before we go. Plant medicine, you do that as well?
Yes. Plant medicine. I started that journey in 2020, and one thing I can say is I am an advocate for it, but it's not for everyone. I believe that there's a calling, there's a right time and space for anybody that is going to be doing any type of plant medicine, and also it's not the solution. What plant medicine does is it's like almost like a fast track. It like gets you to what you need to see and be aware of quicker than it would, traditional ways of getting there. But from there, it's really about your integration and your devotion to continuing the work. Because I mean, I know that I always hear a story. There's people that do plant medicine, either every couple of weeks or months, and they just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. But they're not integrating properly, and they're just looking for that quick fix, which is not there, because they like that feeling. Because when you journey, your heart opens up and you feel love like you've never felt before. And so it's a great space to be in. But of course, we all live in this 3D world as well. So when we come back, it's like, how can we devote our lives so that we continue doing the work so that we can evolve?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's called medicine for a reason. It's not something, you wouldn't get hooked on medicine. Medicine's to help you to heal, and then you don't need it anymore. Yeah. Well,
That's
do you
right.
have a
That's right.
message for our
Exactly.
viewers
I
before we
agree.
go?
My message to your viewers would be, the answer is within. We all know, even I always knew when I was a kid growing up, that there was something special about me, but I didn't know what it was until I started doing the work. And I started seeing that what was special was who I truly am, and not who the world wanted me to be. So just
That just
really,
gave me goosebumps.
yeah. And so my message to you is the answer is within. So look within and don't look for all the answers out here externally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just uncovering your authentic self. I think we've been taught for so many years to fit in and not to stand out. And when you try and do that, you just lose yourself. You lose your vitality,
Mhm.
your
Yeah,
sense of grounding, all of that. And
right.
nobody knows who they are anymore.
That's right. That's right. Because they're all just trying to be like each other. And it's like we were brought here into this space, our souls are in our bodies to show our uniqueness. We're all different. We all have, nobody's fingerprint is the same, right? And so we just have to be more like ourselves, not like everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Erin, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank
I'm
you
going to be
so
interviewing your wife in a week, I think. It is a week, eh? And
yeah.
then the two of you. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I look forward and thank you so much for doing what you do and holding this space in this podcast. It's a light for everybody. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for the work that you're doing as well.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I just like to have resources available for people because I always say if you can't find it, then make it, create
Mhm.
it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Create it. It's there. We're all creators. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a special evening.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much for your time.
Right. Okay. Stay well. Bye bye.